let's move on. Let's stay in the SEC again. I'm sorry that we're staying in the SEC here, but you have to understand that the over/under for first round players in the SEC is 9.5, which is more than any other conference. So it's not that just we're SEC and Big Ten bias, but those are just the majority of players in the first round are from those two conferences. And the Pac-12 actually has a solid number of draft back picks in the first round. Shout out Pac-12, which doesn't exist anymore. But um, let's get over to Kool-Aid McKinstry. And this one is less of a question to me. I feel very solid that Kool-Aid McKinstry, he has a first round draft grade for me. I also believe that he will go in the first round of the draft. But again, we talked about how many offensive positions. There's 21 and a half is the over under for offensive positions taken. 10 and a half is the over under for defensive players taken. Is Kool-Aid McKinstry in that top 10 defensive players in that draft class? Like that's what you have to ask. Like, is there going to be a run on, like, could there be a tackle that no one expected that gets reached on in the first round, like Rukaroro or Chris Jenkins, or does a linebacker get taken because a team needs a linebacker really bad? I don't know. I like to think that corners are really good. Well, I don't like to think that it is a very high valued position. And Kool-Aid McKinstry plays it very well. He's not the same athlete as some of these other corners are, though, that are quote unquote ranked higher than him. But he's got really good film. But here's the thing, though, like Ennis Rakestraw also has a really good film. And Andrew Phillips also has a really good film. So is there a situation that, well, I'll ask you first before we can talk about a situation where you can go in the second round or versus the first round. Do you think that Kool-Aid McKinstry is graded as a first round player in your opinion? And do you think he will go in the first round?
Yes, and yes to both of those. I'll start with the grade. I love his. Obviously, you mentioned he's not the elite athlete, but he's a good enough athlete to play corner in the NFL. That's all you need. Boom, checks that box. Secondly, he's played a ton of snaps, and he is really technically sound. He was coached very well at Alabama. He knows his responsibilities. He was good enough, and they trusted him enough to put him as punt returner at times in his career there in college. Shows you about the athlete and the type of character that he is for them to trust him back there. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And the reason why I feel so good about him, not only do I feel good that he's a first round talent, but also the opportunity for him to be picked is going to be there. Because, like you said, he's not maybe the athlete that Nate Wiggins is, or Quinion Mitchell, or even his teammate, you know, Terry Arnold is, right? So there's a couple of corners that you might have ahead of him in terms of tools you wise. But if you're in that back half of that second or that first round in the mid to late 20s, and you need a corner, and you're looking at the board right now, Kool-Aid McKinstry is going to be like the top of the guy on the board. I think there's a clear tier between him and Rakestraw and TJ Tampa and Andrew Phillips. And I think Center Saul is probably a slot guy. So you could, different kind of player that you're drafting. So it doesn't
Absolutely.
really matter there. So that's why I think I feel good and confident saying that someone's going to win a corner in those last 7, 8 picks in that first round, and Kool-Aid's going to be the number one guy on their board pretty clearly, and they're going to take him. And they're not going to want to trade back because they feel there is a difference between McKinstry and the other corners left on the board. Like I think to me, he is one of your last, like, Rick Straw's pretty sound technically too, like this, but Kool-Aid and McKinstry, like day one, you are going to have a really, really solid cornerback too. A really, really solid cornerback too. And so, like, there's value in that, a lot of value in that, and obviously with upside to grow into blossom in his role. I mean, you think about a guy like Jalen Johnson, who was 4.5 speed as well. Came out of Utah. He fell in the second round because he had question marks health wise, and when he's healthy, he's a elite corner in the NFL. And I see a similar arc there to Kool-Aid McKinstry in terms of, like, you don't have to be this 4.3 blazer, right? You just have to be a really good corner technically, and McKinstry is.
Yeah, I what's funny is before this season, I remember talking about not uh I was confused about how high I was going to actually be on. Oh, geez, my computer's going crazy right now. Can you hear all those beeps on my? Okay, well, I hope it's not in the audio. People are going to go crazy. Jesus. All right, let's just ignore that. All right, anyways, sorry for that, guys. Anyways, I remember at the beginning of the season, I was actually questioning whether or not this secondary was going to be good for Alabama because I was looking at a couple new faces. It's like, you're going to be starting a true freshman, Caleb Downs. I knew that he was really good, but it's hard to say with the true freshman. And Terry Arnold had his struggles in the year before, and Malachi Moore felt like he kept kind of declining. The secondary turned out to be really elite, but the picture that I'm trying to paint though is like the one guy that I felt good about going into this year, which in hindsight sounds crazy because they were all absolutely fantastic. Sounds absolutely nuts that I said anything remotely like that before the season started, but Kool-Aid McKinstry was the guy, man. He was the guy that I felt really, really good about leading that secondary. Like if there was a piece that I'm like, all right, at least one half of the field is shut down, that's Kool-Aid McKinstry, man. He's just a very good football player at a very valued position. So I'm with you on the board. I don't know if he's a top 10 defensive player in this draft class. I'm inclined to think that he is. I'm inclined to think that he might be top 8 or top 9. But yes. But to answer my answer to your question or to the question, is he first round or second rounder? I already answered that. First rounder, first round grade. His over under, I believe, is 28 and a half. Um, as to where he's going to be taken. He could be taken earlier than that. He could be taken later than that. I think if the Lions have their draft pick right there at 30, I think that they would gladly take him there. Or 29. Or the Lions at 29 or 30.
They're at 29.
Okay. So maybe that's why that over under is at 28 and a half. And the over's at minus 130. So I think they feel pretty good about him landing himself at the Lions there. So yeah, we'll see
I'll,
where he lands. I'm excited to see that.
I'll, I want to add too, like McKinstry is another one of these guys, and you've seen guys like Jared Verse or other players, Olu Fashanu, that like came into the year and almost like I want to say hurt their draft stock, but it kind of like these both guys that were talked about, easy top 15 picks, top 10 picks, and they've also like kind of fallen down the wayside. And I wonder if it's some sort of prospect fatigue because like McKinstry, his tape was pretty darn good this year, right? He graded out well PFF. You saw it when you watched him, and he tested pretty darn good compared. He also was recovering from an injury, right? Like I think with a foot injury, and he had a 4.5, and he had a 10 feet broad jump. Right? He very very tested well. Obviously, answer those rumors. Like I don't want to compare him to Patrick Surtain at all, but I just want to say like for comparison's sake, because like they both went to corners at Alabama, and they both have 5-star pedigree, and both guys have played for 2-3 years. Um, at Alabama and played meaningful minutes or snaps. But like Sertan is a guy that like clearly should have been that first overall pick, first overall corner taken in his draft class, and like it was just prospect fatigue that just like cut him down. Now Sertan was a guy that was 6'2", right? Ran a 4.4, like it was elite, and like there was I
Nuts,
don't want to say
Phil.
generational, but like yeah, he was a guy that was like yeah, he's a top 10 corner and probably a top 5 prospect that year. Just happened to go at 9 or 10 whenever he went at the Broncos. So I'm not comparing the two, but I'm just saying for sake, like I wonder if Kool-Aid is getting a little bit of that prospect fatigue where when we get back to the draft day and you have these scouts and the GM's talking, it's like, okay, no. We know McKinstry. We've seen it for 3 years now. This is a really good football player, and he might go higher than you think he is.